Welcome to Hatching Creativity. This isn't just another behavioral health podcast. This is the place where thought leaders converge to talk about real-life challenges, breakthroughs, and pivotal aha moments. Thanks for tuning in to Hatching Creativity. On this episode, I speak with Lee Povey from Povey Performance. Now, I know Lee from the cycling world, where he was the U.S. Olympic development coach and a very well-decorated cyclist himself. Currently, he's a coach of a different kind as the founder and CEO of Povey Performance. Here, he helps executives and leaders build strategies to be the most effective leaders that they can be. Today, we speak about best practices around effective leadership and building a supportive corporate culture by asking and acting on feedback from your staff. And if you like what you hear, please like, share, subscribe, and tell all your friends about Hatching Creativity. Lee, would you like to do a brief introduction of yourself?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I'm a performance strategist. So I now work with founders and their companies. And the simplest way to describe it is I help them understand themselves on a level so that they can be the most effective versions of themselves. There's a bit of teaching in that, leadership skills, communication skills, and there's a lot of kind of understanding work.
So let me ask, when you do something like that, are you speaking with founders and getting a better understanding of where their skills are and where they need complementary people on their team? Or tell me a little bit more about that. That's fascinating. I didn't know that's what you were doing.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It really depends on each individual. The way I look at it, the people that I tend to work with are very smart. And usually struggle to delegate and also struggle to trust others. So they struggle, they're like, I could just do it better, so why don't I just do it? Well, then there's a limit to how much you can get done if you are doing everything.
So it's kind of teaching to let
go. Yeah.
We talk about that all the time because we say how you only have so many hours in the day, right? And you never want to be the smartest person in the room. So I think that kind of lends to what you're talking about, maybe building a good team around you.
Yeah, my clients typically are the smartest person in the room. And that's okay, right? That's why they're the founder. That's why they're the person creating this business. And they need to learn how to work well with others. And that comes from an understanding of themselves and what might show up for them when they work with others. And then also from a greater understanding of themselves, understanding how to relate well to other people. And especially people that might not do it as fast as they might do it, or might not quite do it to their standard, which is okay. There's a business guru called Seth Godin. So if you ever come across him, he's really, really good.
Seth Godin?
Seth Godin, yeah, he has a podcast and he's brilliant.
Yeah,
and one of his sayings is, "Good enough is better than perfect." So the kind of people I work with, they want everything to be perfect, and sometimes things just need to be good enough, and then you can move on to the next.
Sometimes you also learn that it doesn't always have to be your way, right? And we create things all the time, and you have a vision in your head of how you want your business to look, or your operations to look, or your systems to look. And then you bring somebody on and they don't see it the same way you do. It doesn't mean they're wrong, but being open-minded to the possibility that somebody could have a good idea that could make your business better is also really important.
Yes. Yeah. So there's that kind of this working with the ego as well of, it's okay for somebody else to be smart too. And it's okay for, as you say, it's okay for somebody to have a different vision to you, as long as it fits in the overall goal of where the company is going. Do
you remember the cartoon Voltron? Did you ever watch that show when you were a kid? You grew up in England, yeah?
Yeah.
So there was a show called Voltron, and Voltron was all of these little robot kind of action heroes, and they all had their own superpowers. But when the superpowers all come together into the big giant robot, right, it creates this unstoppable force that no matter how bad the bad guys are, right, they're never going to overcome this Voltron. And we've got a teammate, Chris Rivera, and Chris started with us as a contractor, software developer who is a contractor, and he built himself into our chief technology officer, and then he built himself in. Now he's our chief operating officer. And Chris always talks about our team as the Voltron, right? And that's kind of what you want to do, where you've got the whole is way bigger than the sum of all the parts. What are some of the best strategies that you could say to somebody who is starting their own business or a treatment center, a healthcare clinic, that can help them to find the right people that can help them get where they want to go?
Yeah, I think instinct is actually, for people that don't know me, I'm very science and data driven. Former elite sports coach, everything was about the data, analyzing everything. We tend to have pretty good instincts as human beings around other human beings and our relationship to them. So, employ people that make you feel good. Employ people that you think, I'm going to have a good working relationship with this person. Then you can figure the rest of it out.
It also lends to the culture.
Yes.
That creates the culture at your company that you want to work at.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another important piece as well. I see leaders that almost suffer in silence, working with people that they don't necessarily like or they don't get on with. And we spend the majority of our time in our work environments. Even now, most of the people I work with are in a remote or hybrid situation, but you're still having meetings all day, every day with these people. Mm-hmm. You actually enjoy the work. So that's the first thing. Work with people that you enjoy working with, and then just be really honest. Do they have the skill sets? And if they don't, and it's not working out, make that decision quickly. Again, I see people work with people for an extended period of time they know are not really going to work out, but they don't want the difficult conversations. So they avoid the difficult conversations. So they keep working around somebody rather than either coaching the person to be better at their job or going, hey, this isn't working. And that's okay. We see firing people or letting people go as this really bad thing, and it's not. Because what you're doing is you're allowing them to get to what they should be doing faster. Because if it isn't working with you, well, then you're actually getting in their way of what they should be doing.
Lee, you just hit on a few things that I want to just recall back, because there's some things that really stood out. The first is an expression my dad used to always say, which was, if you're given 100 envelopes and you're told that one of those envelopes has $100 bill in it, and you open the first couple envelopes and you don't have that $100 bill, what's your reaction? Do you get disappointed that you don't have it? Or do you say, I'm that much closer to the goal, right? And that's a really good way of looking at hiring too. We've had to let people go from time to time, and it's always hard because genuinely in our company, we love the people as people, but sometimes the fit isn't right. And while it's really hard to do that, the other point that you had just made, which is really important, is you have to hire slow and make good decisions on hiring, but you have to let go very quickly when something becomes not working or something is not working as it should. And we look at a thing at our company, we call it skill sets versus personality, because a skill set can always be learned. But if your personality isn't right, then it definitely is going to affect the longevity of the relationship or the longevity of how they fit into the culture.
And that's tiring, Mike. We've all been there working with people that, and you don't have to be best friends with people. I want to be clear here. You don't have to share the same hobbies. You don't have to have the same interests. You don't need to be close friends, but you need to respect their work and like them. That's important. Otherwise, it's just so emotionally draining to be working with people. You're like, oh, do I have to get on a meeting with that person? Oh, I don't really want to. And we've all been there. We've all been in these situations where you're working with people who think this isn't right for me. This isn't right for them.
We had somebody that worked for us for a little while. She was here for a few months. And when I looked at the resume and I saw that she had very short tenure at many companies, that was a first red flag, right? Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of speaking on human resources and hiring, and I always say, if somebody's averaging 3 to 6 months at a job, you are not going to be the one to change that or break that cycle. Don't put yourself in that position, right? And I remember she was here and she kept saying that the whole company felt like a club and she was on the outside. And at the same time, her attitude and her personality was so negative and such a drain that it wasn't that people didn't make an attempt to get to know her. It was that she was boxing herself out of the culture of communication. And, these are, again, personality things. You recognize she was pretty good at what she did, but nobody could stand working with her. So the other thing I was going to ask you about, you mentioned data-driven, and you talk about data, and we talk about data a lot in behavioral healthcare. We also talk about data a lot because we're a software company and the importance of data. You had talked a little bit about building a team. What kind of data would you be looking at? And what should somebody be tracking or wanting to keep track of to build a good culture?
Yeah, I mean, there's various tools. So you can do things like 360s for your leaders. So a leader might have an impression of themselves and think, oh, this is how I lead, this is how I work, this is how I run my company. And then we do a 360, which is to interview the most important people in their life, the people that work with them, anonymously, so that they give that really good, clear feedback. And we're skilled at making sure that we get the right feedback out of people and the right questions to ask. And then you get a pretty good look at how that person actually shows up in their work. And then we can use that with the leader to say, well, here's how you think you show up. Here's how your team is reflecting you show up. How do we get from one to the other? Where do you want to be, and what needs to change for you to get to where you'd like to be instead?
I love that. So your company, so you do things like that?
I outsource that to other companies that specialize in that work. And then I use the report with the founder of the company or with the CEO or with the executive team, depending on who we're doing the 360 with. So, when you're looking at culture, it's very clear culture comes from the top. So how the founder is how the rest of the company is going to be, because they are setting the tone for the company, or how the CEO is, they're setting the tone for the company. So if you're going to change culture, you've got to start there first. I've been in companies where they're very about, and this happens often, where they're very about looking after their staff and making sure the staff take enough time off and they don't overwork, and then the founder works 80 hours a week. And it doesn't matter what their policy is, everybody's looking at the founder and going, well, they're still in the office, so I should probably still be in the office. And then the founder goes, I don't understand it, Lee. These people don't take time off. I can't get them to rest. They're all burnt out. I'm like, here's the mirror. Let's reflect back how you behave, and then how that sets the tone for the company. And culture, people make culture more complicated than it is. It's not actually that complicated. Just be a decent human being. If your colleague reaches out to you for something, respond to your colleague. Have an idea of what you're there to do. So I work with a lot of kind of newer tech companies, and Google set the store there that you have to have on-site massage therapists and playrooms and all of these things. When we actually look at what human beings need, none of that stuff really matters. What matters is you get paid what you believe is a fair rate for the work you're doing. So a market comparable compensation. You understand your role in the organization. So you get feedback from the people that you work with. You get feedback from your team leaders, your managers, the CEO, whatever, saying, this is how you fit into our culture, and this is how you are fitting into the mission. and you understand what the mission of the company is and that you're aligned with it. So if you work in a company that you don't understand what the mission is, you don't know how you fit into it, doesn't really matter how much money you get paid, you're going to eventually feel disenfranchised, disheartened, like, I don't understand why I'm here. And if you don't get feedback about it, so you don't get clear feedback of, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? Where's my areas for growth? Again, people get really unsettled. That's
We
it.
talk
The
about that.
bonus structure stuff, the unlimited paid time off and things like that, they sound great and there can be a place for them. They're not really what keeps people in businesses.
I really like what you said about letting people know if they're doing a good job. And it's really important to have those benchmarks set ahead of time. I'm guilty of that at times. We get busy in our own day. We get busy in doing our particular role. And then somebody's work anniversary comes around and you go, oh crap, we haven't had any kind of performance review or evaluation or discussion about what they've been doing versus expectations. And I think that's really important. That's a really good point, that you let people know how are they working towards meeting your expectations. It's huge. And one of the things that is really helpful in our software that we do is we have anonymous employee satisfaction surveys looking at employer, the leadership of the company, the management team, your workplace safety, culture, all of those things. But as you mentioned, it's all about the data. If you're conducting surveys, and in behavioral health, it's required that you're collecting surveys from your staff, that if you're collecting them in a manner that doesn't allow you to aggregate the data and actually use it for anything of importance, then what ends up happening is it actually works against doing these surveys. Because anytime you ask somebody to do something like a survey or for their feedback on anything, and if you don't do anything with it, they remember that really well. And then they say, oh, well, they're just wasting my time. Conversely, if you take these surveys and you look at them with your management team and you look at them with an objective opinion, or and you look at them objectively, you can see a lot of areas that people can improve. I know you and I have spoken a couple times about Ted Lasso, and I love the analogy of his suggestion box. And everybody just, they called him a wanker, and nobody showed him any respect until he took the one suggestion and did something with it. And that sounds like exactly what you're saying. I love your concepts on culture too.
People just, ultimately, we're all little kids that want to be loved. It's really not much more complicated than that. We're walking through the world trying to find ways to be seen and be loved. So if we come from that understanding, the people working with you, for you, they want to be recognized. And as you say, if we go to them and say, how does your manager show up? What are the things that you need to do your job better? And then we don't do them, well, then they feel unloved, because as far as they're concerned, they're now being actively ignored. And there's a difference between being, well, they just don't know what I need, to, okay, now you're actively ignoring me because I've told you what I need and you're still not doing it. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Don't do a survey if you're not going to put the results of it into action. And at least explain. I think I run workshops on communication. So I run workshops on how to give feedback. And I'm world-class at giving feedback. And the reason I'm world-class at giving feedback is because I used to be absolutely atrocious at giving feedback. I mean, you might have even seen this, Mike. As a sports coach, at times, I would see somebody doing something and I'd go up to them and like, why are you doing it like that? Why don't you do it like this? Instead, you're going to go faster. Now, my intent was always from a place of love, of like, I love the sport. I love track cycling. I love seeing people be better. I'm trying to help them. But my delivery was appalling. And the impact would be these people would feel judged, they'd feel belittled, they'd feel slighted. And I couldn't understand it because I'm like, I have a fairly tough skin around feedback. So I'd be like, great, tell me all the stuff. I don't care if you can tell me how to do it faster. But I realized I'm a little bit different from most people like that. And actually, the way you deliver the feedback has a huge impact on how the feedback is being received. The feedback can be basically the same feedback, but the words used change it completely. And I realized I wasn't asking for permission. And that's a huge bit about giving feedback. So I teach people now when they're giving feedback, the first thing is, hey, you open to some feedback on this. Then the next bit is, what's your experience? Hey, I saw this, how did it go for you? What did you think? That's part of the data gathering. Okay, right. Oh, they know what they're not doing well. Well, now I can target what to do to help them. It changed my world as a sporting coach. But I had to upset a few people to get there, to go, hang on a second, I'm not being as effective as I'd like to be. How do I flip this around to become more effective? And then I started studying how to give feedback and learning more about human beings and studying what high performance really meant. And it's all partnerships. Like, work culture is partnerships. Mm-hmm. Just telling people what to do doesn't make people feel very valued. So the more autonomy you can give them while they understand how they fit into the overall mission is incredibly powerful. And that's what we're always trying to do, is empower your staff to be leaders for themselves and for their own departments and in the company. I'm a basketball fan. So it's I moved to America, as 10 years ago. I've got to pick some American sport to be able to talk to people about. I tried football. It takes 4.5 hours. I haven't got the patience for that. I'm a sprinter, but I can't do that. Baseball takes even longer. I watched ice hockey. I couldn't follow the puck. I'm like, I can't see what's going on. So, okay, basketball, I can get it. They're athletes. They sprint really fast. There's a skill element to it. I could understand it. And I lived in the Bay Area, so I became a Warriors fan. And for me, I think one of the biggest parts about the Warriors' success, apart from having the best point guard ever in Steph Curry, is their team atmosphere and ethos. And everybody's encouraged to be a leader on the floor. You don't often see Steve Kerr berating his players. He's very upbeat and he trusts them a lot, and he gives them a lot of trust. And then he'll course correct as needed. And I think for me, that is great leadership, is trusting the people that you're working with, giving them opportunities. When they fail, treat it as a learning opportunity, not a discipline opportunity.
Yep.
And obviously, if people can't do the job, as we said earlier about hiring, right? There's some people that just are not suited for the role. And if they keep not being able to do the role, that's one thing. Most of us just need training. We just need support. It's like, oh, what did you learn from that? Okay, how are you going to do that differently next time? Right, give that a go. Go and do it. Let's see how you get on.
Sure. Well, my dad always had an expression, and I've been using this since I was a kid, and he says, tact is the ability to make a point without making an enemy, and having an understanding of the experience of somebody else, right? We talk about trauma all the time. And one of the side effects of trauma is a trauma response. Sometimes people think that they're okay with criticism, or even if it's a constructive criticism, but when they get criticized, the word used, the context used, the tone of voice used could really trigger trauma responses and do the opposite of what you're looking to do. Even if you're looking to just, hey, you hired me as a coach to give you good information. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not trying to offend you, but, being able to step back and look at everybody's life experiences and how they're different can also be really important with that.
For me, moving countries made me have to be a better coach, because the culture here is very different to the culture in the UK. And I just didn't know that until I moved here. People are blunter in the UK, much more direct with their feedback in the UK than they are typically in America. So, I went with that kind of British, one of my friends would say, I hope I can swear on this podcast. One of my friends would say, one of the first things I said to him is, why the fuck are you doing it like that, mate? And this American guy's looking at me like, What? It's just a different culture, same as Australians are very blunt and direct as well. And it made me have to really stop and think about, again, coming back to that word of being effective. How can I be effective? Because the way I've done it before, that worked before in a different culture, is no longer working here. Mm-hmm. So I've got to change. And I can say, well, I'm British, that's the way I behave. Or I can say, I need to change and adapt to be more effective. And, one nugget from me about leadership is I strongly believe the best leaders are the most adaptable leaders. When I hear somebody talk about their leadership style, I immediately know they're going to have limitations in their leadership. Because if they have a leadership style, that means that they can only work with people that work with that leadership style. And right. I believe you've got to adapt yourself to meet everybody where they're at, their level of education, their level of understanding about what you're doing, their communication level. An analogy I like to use a lot about feedback is a cookie jar. And I used to use this about track sprint cycling, right? So, Michael know this, as sprint athletes, you have so much energy in your system that you can use in an effort. And once it's gone, you need time to recover and replenish the cookie jar. Well, feedback is the same. When somebody gives you critical or opportunity feedback, it has a hit. And when somebody gives you appreciation, acknowledgement, and compliments, that's putting cookies into the jar. Mm-hmm. And then when somebody gives you that, hey, here's something I think you missed, that's taking some cookies out of the jar. What I see a lot is empty cookie jars. And when you get to that point, the person can no longer receive any kind of critical feedback. And I'll often see this when I'm working in relationships in companies. A manager will say, I can't train this person anymore. Whatever I say, they argue with me, they get defensive. The first thing I say to them is, how often do you praise them? How often do you point out what they do well? And they'll kind of look at me blankly like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, how much time do you spend acknowledging them as a human being? And usually it's very little to none. And it's not because they're bad people, it's because they believe their job is to tell you what you're not doing well.
Right.
If you don't also tell people what they're doing well, going back to what makes somebody feel good in a company, they don't know how they're part of the mission. They don't know what it is they're doing right. And we've got to point out what they're doing right. And the best leaders do that on around a 50-50 scale. So it's 50%, here's all the stuff you're doing well, 50% the opportunities, and not in the old sandwich one of like, here's a compliment.
Not the shit sandwich.
Not the shit sandwich. Like that. Here's the compliment. Here's the thing that I need you to do better. Or here's another compliment for the icing on the top. We actually find it's better if you just stick to the individual things at a time. You see somebody doing something well, point that out. You see some opportunity, point that out. Don't think you need to play a game with them. Just be noting in your own self, am I giving this person enough praise? And almost nobody, even the best leaders, really struggle to do that, giving enough praise.
There's a couple things that you hit on here that's, in my opinion, really important. We have a similar type of a conversation with our 13-year-old daughter, and we refer to it as our emotional bank account. And, you've got to make deposits before you can take out of that bank account, right? And if all you're doing is taking, and if every conversation is a pull from somebody's emotional bank account, sooner or later, that person's going to lower that entrance into it. And you're not going to be able to get in, and you're going to have a wall when you're trying to relate to somebody. So it is really important. I like the cookie jar aspect as well. We have to give if we're going to take. The other thing that I think is really important that you mentioned, Lee, is authenticity. You didn't use the word, but what I'm hearing you say is having an authentic relationship that feedback is given. So authentic feedback is good, and it's corrective at the same time. It's almost like oftentimes managers feel like they have to play this role. And anytime we try to fit into a role or a construct, that's when we're not authentic, right? We're trying to do this manager role or this parent role. I always found it's much easier to just talk on the authentic level about what I'm thinking, what I'm experiencing. What are you thinking and experiencing, rather than trying to put boss and employee role or any of that. Speaking of, have you ever read the book Flat Army? Are you familiar with it?
No.
Flat Army, they talk a lot about this, and it's really talking about hierarchy. And oftentimes when you have a hierarchy in a company, it's I'm above you or you're below me. And the Flat Army really talks about a hierarchy that doesn't involve that. And it involves an overall team rowing in the same direction for the same goal, which is exactly what you were talking about everybody being understanding of where they fit in their contribution to the overall mission.
Yeah. And there's a lot that I could respond to there. I didn't respond to it earlier, but I just want to say your dad sounds like a lovely guy.
He is. He's my best dude. He absolutely
what
is.
What a bunch of pearls of wisdom there. I can understand how you're the man you are.
Thanks for tuning in to Hatching Creativity. We appreciate your support. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and tell all your friends about the show. And remember, it's never just about one thing.